All right, everybody. Welcome back to the Book Club of Enoch. My name is Paxton Pritchett, and yeah, so excited to be here with you all right now, back at the Book Club of Enoch. So, we're back. Happy New Year's, everyone. It has been a good New Year's Day for me. Hope this holiday season, this Christmas season, has been going fairly well for y'all. Let me try to get this situated well. And yeah, we are recommencing the Book Club of Enoch this beautiful New Year's Day. If you're new to the channel, the Book Club of Enoch is a weekly live stream. Well, it's supposed to be weekly. This past semester, it has not really been as weekly as it should have been, but it is what it is, and now it's a new semester. So the ideal is it's going to be a weekly podcast, a weekly live stream that goes into the Book of Enoch, where we read the Book of Enoch together and we contemplate it from a Christian perspective a little bit. So, excuse me. So, yeah, that's what it is. This past semester, we have dove into the first part of the Book of Enoch, which is the Book of the Watchers. And this next upcoming semester, we're really going to be diving into the second part of the Book of Enoch, which is the book of I believe it's called the Parables of Enoch, which is arguably my favorite part of the Book of Enoch. And so that will be a very, very, I think it'll be fun. Really excited for it. But in this meantime, in between this start of the Book of the Watchers, having done the Book of the Watchers and now going into the second part of the Book of Enoch, let's first spend this fun New Year's Day just drinking a little drink together, like some coffee. I got some coffee, or it's just cream right here. I still have to pour it in there. And yeah, let's drink some coffee, some tea, some cider, some water if you're boring. Kidding. And let's just read through the whole thing together, the whole Book of the Watchers. I know my voice, I'm no like Morgan Freeman or Anthony Hopkins or someone that could just read it and make you go like, oh, that's such a great voice. That's not my voice. I understand that. But if you listen through it with us and just hang out with us in this time, I'm definitely honored to be here with y'all and just honored that we get to spend this time together. We just pour this drink real quickly and get my coffee ready. And then we have a few review slides and we'll be getting into the Book of Enoch. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put it into our chat. On our chat, like I may not have all the answers to every question. In fact, I know I won't have all the answers to the questions, but please feel free to ask a question. If you're curious about something about the Book of Enoch, let's definitely try to keep it Enoch related. But if you have any questions, please feel free to put it in the chat. If you're listening to this not live, if you're like listening someday back and it's even been a little bit hot minute, please feel free to ask a question and I'd be more than happy to dialogue and talk about it on an episode. Add a little more cream because I am weak. I'm not brave enough for black coffee too often, occasionally. And I will show you my favorite, not my favorite, but add a little whipped cream on top because why not? And then we'll get started with this fun sound. This might be cringe, but okay. All right. How's about we get into the Book of Enoch? So for this, I'm going to share my screen real quickly. Let's see. Find the right thing. Entire screen. And from there, we're going to look at over here to the slides. So the Book of Enoch, to do a little review before we start diving into before we start reading the Book of Enoch together, let's do a little bit of review, looking at some of the things we learned this past semester about what exactly is the Book of Enoch. So the Book of Enoch is an expansion of Genesis 5 and 6, written during the Second Temple Jewish period. It seemed to mostly, if not completely, have been written during that time. The Second Temple Jewish period was the period when, as the name suggests, the Second Temple in Jerusalem was standing. So the Second Temple was like created, I believe, sometime around the 500s BC, and then it was destroyed in AD 70. 70 years, approximately 70-ish years after the birth of Christ. And that is kind of the Second Temple Jewish period. And in that period, they wrote a lot of pieces of literature. The Jewish people, they weren't just kind of silent, not thinking or writing and contemplating. Instead, they would write many, many, many pieces of literature. And some of these pieces of literature have made it into the Catholic Bible, such as the Book of Wisdom, the Wisdom of Sirach, or it's also called Ecclesiasticus, which in my opinion is such a cool sounding name. Ecclesiasticus. That's just cool. You also have First and Second Maccabees, but some of these texts didn't make it into the Catholic canon, such as the Book of Enoch. The Book of Enoch is considered canon by a few groups that claim to be Christian, but most do not consider it canon. But it was written mostly, if not completely, during that time period of Second Temple Jewish literature, along with things such as the Maccabees and the Book of Wisdom, the Wisdom of Sirach, and more. And really, it dives into some ideas found in Genesis 5 and 6, but expands them more. So, for example, in Genesis 5, Enoch, the book, is a lot about, well, Enoch, the character, who is only in a few verses of scripture, but it takes those few verses and kind of expands about the character Enoch. So in chapter 5, Enoch's first and really, to my knowledge, only appearance in the Old Testament apart from genealogies, I think is right here in Genesis 5, where it says Enoch lived 65 years and became the father of Methuselah. Then Enoch walked with God 300 years after he became the father of Methuselah, and he had other sons and daughters. So all the days of Enoch were 365 years. Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. So that's something that we see here about Enoch in the Bible. And the book of Enoch will definitely dedicate way more time than just 3 verses to the character of Enoch. And we're going to read today a lot of what the book says about the character Enoch, especially in the first parts. Then we also see, and this will be especially important for today, that the book of Enoch talks more about, kind of expands, so to speak, Genesis 6 and the idea of the sons of God who have children with the daughters of men. So we've talked about in previous episodes of the Book Club of Enoch that there are different views of these verses from Genesis 6, verses 1 through 4. It talks about sons of God, these characters called sons of God, coming down, having children with the daughters of men. And many people see these children as being the Nephilim. And there are different views about these verses here. We talked about 3 different views. Like, some people look at these verses and think these sons of God are angels or some type of spiritual beings coming down and having children with women, while other people see it as the sons of Seth, certain humans coming and having children with the daughters of men, which are, I believe, something like the daughters of Cain or some type of like non-believing community. And then you have a third view, which is about the basically sons of God being kings and them going into polygamy. So the idea of the sons of God being angelic beings and them having children with the daughters of men is the view that the book of Enoch in the Second Temple Jewish period took. And this is the verses that really we find a lot of influence in the book of Enoch. It says in verse 1 of chapter 6, "Now it came about when men began to multiply on the face of the land, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves, whomever they chose. Then the Lord said, My spirit shall not strive with man forever, because he also is flesh. Nevertheless, his days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came in to the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown." So that passage and also this passage from Genesis 5 are really 2 of the main areas in the book of that are discussed in the book of Enoch, but super expanded. And really, in my opinion, I think it's speculation by these Second Temple Jews about what's going on. So the book of Enoch is also called First Enoch. And it's called First Enoch because there's a second and a third Enoch. And some people may look at them and like think, okay, so they're a trilogy, kind of like First and Second Corinthians in the Bible. You have 2 different Corinthians or letters to the Corinthians written by the same author, Paul, just talking to the church. Or you think of the Old Testament, like 1st and 2nd Samuel, or 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles. And it's kind of like it's a sequel, a continuation of 1st Chronicles. That's what 2nd Chronicle is. Or 2nd Kings is a continuation of 1st Kings. 2nd Samuel, a continuation of 1st Samuel. And the question is, what was that the same with Enoch? Is 2nd Enoch and 3rd Enoch a continuation of 1st Enoch, kind of like Chronicles is? 2nd Chronicles is a continuation of 1st Chronicles. And the thing about the Book of Enoch that some people have explained is that's not the case. That's not the case with Enoch. With Enoch, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Enoch, a better way to think of it, and I don't think this is my original way of thinking. I don't think I came up with this, but I really love it a lot. It's like thinking of like reboots of movies. So think like it's like they're more reboots than sequels. Kind of like the new Superman movie or kind of like the Spider-Man movies. It's like we have in modern superhero movies, especially, we have where they just take the same character and keep telling the same kind of mythos, the same story over and over and over again. So like, for example, with Spider-Man, we had Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, but then we repeat it with Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, where it goes into the mythos of Spider-Man again, telling his origin story and stuff like that. Then we have a 3rd Spider-Man, Tom Holland, where it's another time doing that. And that's similar to what 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Enoch are like. It's not as much of a sequel as much as of it is as let's retell the story again, but from a different either perspective or something kind of like that. So like 1st Enoch, 2nd Enoch, and 3rd Enoch, to my knowledge, it's been a little while since I've read 2nd and 3rd Enoch, but they both tell kind of the story of Enoch as being this guy that was on earth and then got transformed into heaven, or transferred into heaven. And the Watchers make an appearance in all 3 of them. It's like there's similarities, but there's also a lot of differences, and they kind of retell the same story, or at least retell parts of the same story instead of being sequels or continuations. 1st and 2nd Enoch, it's kind of a great comparison to compare it to Tobey Maguire's and Andrew Garfield's, because they're similar. They're more similar to each other than they are 3rd Enoch or Tom Holland Spider-Man. And if you know anything about the Spider-Man movies, I could be wrong here, but from my watching of them, Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movies are a lot more similar to each other than Tom Holland. Tom Holland's Spider-Man movies taking place in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's like that crazy, it's the crazy baby of the family, you might be able to call it. Like it's a lot different than the other siblings. And the same goes with Enoch. 1st Enoch, 2nd Enoch, 3rd Enoch. They are very different than each other, 3rd Enoch being the most different. And they're also written probably in different time periods as well. Kind of like how the Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, and Tom Holland Spider-Man movies are all written or directed and released, different eras. Like you had the Tobey Maguire, that's the 2000s, Andrew Garfield's 2010s, Tom Holland's is 2010 and onward to 2020s. Well, in a similar manner, you have the 1st Enoch, 2nd Enoch, and 3rd Enoch. They are written, there's a likely chance they're written at very different time periods. 1st and 2nd Enoch are closer to each other, but 3rd Enoch is probably hundreds of years in the future from 1st and 2nd Enoch. And for the Book Club of Enoch, our main focus is going to be 1st Enoch, because 1st Enoch, it's more of a guaranteed written during the Second Temple Jewish period. And because of that, it really does give us a benefit to reading it as Christians, because this isn't just a later Jewish text that was written after Christ came to earth and just kind of like thinking of the Jewish side of things. Instead, it's actually Jews who were still waiting for the Messiah to come writing this book. And while 2nd Enoch could likely be written during afterwards. And so the idea I'm trying to say here, and I apologize, I'm kind of stumbling over my words, is that, 1st Enoch, as Christians, I think it has the most value for reading because of the time it was written. It was written during the Second Temple Jewish period, very likely. And with that in mind, it's like we get to see how Jews were speculating about what would the Messiah be like. 2nd and 3rd Enoch, they were written at different periods. Second Enoch might have been written in the Second Temple Jewish period, but that's debated. And Third Enoch's definitely written later. And so Second and Third Enoch were already kind of written, especially Third Enoch, maybe Second Enoch, were written kind of when Judaism and Christianity more were split apart. While First Enoch was written before Christ came to earth, so there really wasn't like this split of Christianity and Judaism. And like I said, Second Enoch is definitely more up in the air because there's debate about when that one was written. But First Enoch is definitely written before Christ came, at least mostly. And I think it was probably all written during the Second Temple Jewish period. So, like we said earlier, Second Temple Jewish literature, that's what First Enoch is. Written in Second Temple Jewish literature overall is literature written between the Old and New Testament, or at least written during the Second Temple period, which as Christians, we would see mostly being like the extra canonical books. Or like if you're Protestant, it would be the Catholic editions, it would be the Book of Enoch and things like that. It shows us how Jews were thinking around the time of Christ. And that's where it's super cool to be able to read these ancient texts, because these ancient texts show us what Jews might have been thinking about when Christ came to earth. Christ came to earth and lived on earth the early parts of the AD era, in the Common Era. Christ was resurrected from the dead around AD 30 or around that and went to heaven. So in that period of his incarnation, when he's on earth, living amongst us and teaching humanity, teaching the Jews, whenever we read Second Temple Jewish literature, we can help understand more what these Jews might have been thinking about when they saw Christ walking on earth and they saw Christ talking about the Messiah, the Son of Man. They saw him talking about God. Well, what were these Jews thinking about God? Well, this is where we can read Second Temple Jewish literature and be reading the more contemporary, or at least kind of literature that they were thinking and writing about, and that was absorbed more into their brain by the time Christ came to earth. And it's literature that's many times newer than the Bible, the Old Testament. And so it helps us see like ways they were thinking about the Old Testament. So I think that's really a big reason why we should read First Enoch, or why we can read First Enoch, is because it helps us understand more of how Jews might be thinking about the Old Testament and processing what was revealed in Scripture. So when was it written? So as the subject of date pertains to First Enoch 1 through 36, or First Enoch 1 through 36, that's called the Book of the Watchers. Michael Heiser writes this quote right here about when this part was written. That's the part we'll be reading today. That's the part we've been going through overall in the Book Club of Enoch, and we'll be continuing on to the parables of Enoch starting as soon as next week, which I'm super excited about. But as for this first part of the Book of Enoch, Michael Heiser writes, as the subject of date pertains to First Enoch 1 through 36, the Book of the Watchers, Archie Wright summarizes the current scholarly assessment. A scholarly consensus for the date of the Book of the Watchers places the extant Aramaic form sometime in the 3rd century BCE on the paleography of the Qumran fragments. Some suggest pushing the date farther back into an earlier Hellenistic period, or perhaps the Persian period. So it seems to at least be written in the 3rd century BCE, so that's already a couple hundred years before Christ came to earth, is whenever the thing we're reading today, when that was likely written. And so who wrote it? So it seems that scholars believe that it was written not by just a single person, but it's basically different works stitched together and put together. So it's not like a guy sat down who's like this visionary author and was like, I'm going to write the Book of Enoch. So he sits down and starts writing the Book of Enoch. Nor is it likely that Enoch himself, this descendant of Adam from before the flood, wrote it either. I don't think that's the case that he wrote it. And it doesn't seem to be the case that a single human even wrote it. Instead, Michael Heiser says this about it. He says, First Enoch, as we know it today, is actually a composite literary work with parts dated to different periods. As Isaac notes, First Enoch is clearly composite, representing numerous periods and writers. This determination is based on several considerations, internal evidence, historical reference points in First Enoch, B, paleography, scribal handwriting style, and C, grammatical linguistic features. As Wright notes, one of the difficulties in dealing with First Enoch is that it is not a single work of one author, but rather a collection of at least 7, possibly 8 pieces of work. The composite whole of First Enoch includes 108 chapters, most of them very short. So from this quote, we see this idea that there could be 7 or possibly 8 basically writings in the Book of Enoch, 8 authors writing the Book of Enoch, and they've all been stitched together. And so I think that's an important thing to remember, especially if we try to think like maybe, hey, what if Enoch himself wrote it? Well, I think this right here is a piece of evidence that might show that I don't think Enoch himself wrote the book. There are other reasons not to believe that we won't get into today, but this is one of them right here, is the idea and the scholarly idea that it wasn't written by one person, Enoch being one person. So that is some background information on the Book of Enoch. And let me get off this sharing. There we go. Back like this. And so now that we've done a little bit of review about what is the Book of Enoch, now we're going to get into actually reading the Book of Enoch. We're going to look at the Book of Enoch and read through the first part of it, which is the Book of the Watchers. And when I say that it's 36 chapters, that sounds like a lot. And it will be. We'll have a fun time just sitting down, drinking coffee, and reading it. But also, it's not as bad as it sounds or as crazy as it sounds, because 36 chapters in the Book of Enoch isn't really a lot, because a lot of the chapters are very, very small. Like some of them being even like two verses, 2 or 3 verses. And so we're going to be reading what's called the Book of the Watchers. The Book of the Watchers is the first part of the Book of Enoch. And it's basically this discussion about Genesis 6, about the sons of God coming down and having children with the daughters of men. And it kind of takes that and it expands that story a lot more. And so that's what we read through this past semester and went into some details, looking at even lessons we can learn from the story. And I think after this, we'll talk again about a little bit about a lesson we can learn, which I think is really cool. Even though the book is not part of the Bible, that doesn't mean it's still without moral lessons you can learn, which is really cool. So without further ado, I say we get into reading First Enoch 1 through 36, which is the Book of the Watchers. And so for this, we begin